Thank you, guys. I'm a motion graphics generalist from UK, Belfast. Nick Slimmet got in touch with me, guys, because I've been making daily renders with the water plugin that those guys have made for Cinema 4D. A little bit more about myself. I got into 3D off doing one-a-day renders, so it was to teach myself and things like that. But what I'll do right now is let you see a little bit of my work over the past few years and show you my reel.
Okay, ready?
Okay, cool. You guys, thank you. You guys seen at the end a big collage of pictures? That is my one-a-day project. Every one of those that you've seen was me taking a few hours out of every day to try and create something new. So what is a daily render? It's a little obvious, but you can take a daily photo. You could paint a picture every day. You could draw, and every day you would try and create something new. These are some of the renders, for example, so you get an idea, a nice full screen. The maximum I would allow these to take per day is around 4 hours, but they average around 1 hour per day. So you can see a good example of RealFlow and on the right, X particles. And then more RealFlow in the middle. And of course, the idea is to try and be as creative as possible, and try ideas and try things and put a little bit of weight on things that you're not so sure about. So it's just some samples then. So why do it? It's to grow. It's to get a little bit better. You've got to try and grow as a creative. And a lot of people, when they get into work and normal routine of work, their creative stuff it kind of drops because you get into a routine of work. So this is my extra time every day to try and keep, as Ira Glass puts it, it's to close the creative gap. Ira Glass is quite a famous quote, and this is just a little sentence out of it. He says, "It's only by going through a volume of work that you will close the creative gap, and all your work will be as good as your ambitions." So I feel like with my one-a-day, I'm getting a little bit closer and closer to what I would like, my products, my work, my renders to look like. One of my biggest influences is Beeple. Mike Winckelmann, he's from America. He's the grandfather of doing daily 3D work. I think he did a few years of drawing, but he's now up to 3,422 days, which is crazy. It's over 9 years Mike has done this, so he's a big influence. And Mike, if you're watching, hello. So how are they done? Sticking to 3D, and of course it's a little obvious. I'm on the Maxon stage. I use Maxon, Cinema 4D, with some RealFlow. Some X particles sometimes. Octane render is to render out the visuals nice and fast on the graphics cards. And then some Photoshop or After Effects, depending on which it needs. You'll see all of these soon. But the reason I'm here today is to show you guys RealFlow and show you the new integrated plugin into Cinema 4D. So let's jump straight in. RealFlow, in case any of you guys aren't aware, is a water simulation plugin. It deals with particles. It can output a lot of other things, such as clouds and smoke and physics dynamics. But for now, for the integrated Cinema 4D plugin, it focuses primarily on water simulation. And this is the little render that we created yesterday, live here on stage. I'm sure Maxon will have the video. You can guys watch this back in the future on their YouTube channel. But what we did yesterday is we created some pipes, and we plumbed our water through the pipes. And of course, we cached it, and we simulated it. And we got a little bit creative with the water on the side, and you'll see how fast and responsive the plugin is. This is the one we finished yesterday, and it's just beautiful. This is quite high quality settings as well, so even a laptop like this was able to handle it really well, and we got there. Today, though, I have a lot to cover with you guys. We're going to look at a thing called Daemons, which is being a little bit more destructive with your water simulations and being a little bit more violent. We'll see. I've got some notes here because we have a lot to cover. I'll try and get started, and we'll have a look at some of the projects. So this is a similar example to yesterday's water simulation, just to give you guys an idea of the kind of thing that you can create. This was a different direction I decided to take with it, a little bit more abstract with a glowing light at the bottom. If I open the project and let you guys see what this actually looks like inside the editor, it's much the same principle as yesterday's and the pipe example you just seen. Only this time I've hidden the pipe, and the water is flowing and trickling down the pipe to meet our glowing sphere at the end. And again, you can see how fluid and real-time this is in the viewport at any stage, even while playing back these complicated meshes. I'm able to zoom in and zoom out and pan the camera around. And we can even jump into Octane and have a little look at what this would look like, and we'll get an impression before we commit to a render. For myself, doing one a day, this is very, very vital that we get instant feedback, both from RealFlow and from Octane. You can turn around creative work much, much quicker and interact with it. So that's one example of the kind of thing that we did yesterday. Here's a second one. And I have lots and lots of these things to show you guys. This is another one, similar principle. We created a torus, or a cylindrical shape with a hole in the middle. And you'll notice up here we cut a little hole. So let me open that one, and I'll show you guys very quickly. And then we'll get into making some stuff after this. So yeah, we'll go back to our normal layout. This is quite simply a torus shape with a hole in it. And we're filling up the object with the water. And if I simply turn on this display tag and hide the geometry, you can see quite clearly that the water is filling up the inside of this and looking really quite dynamic. And for me, making a picture every day, I decided let's get our main camera, and we will of course hide our torus. And whatever frame that I think that looks the most dynamic, or the thing that I'm looking, after some tweaking and sort of creative control on it, we picked that frame and then we rendered it, of course. You'll notice that I stopped the emitter around here. These were just little ideas that I tried during the creation process of this one. I think I stopped on a frame around here, and I thought that looked quite nice. Again, we can have a little look at Octane. So you guys get an immediate example of viewport to what it will look like a little bit in this render engine. And it's nice and quick and responsive, of course, being lit. We decided as well creatively to put a glowing tube in the center because, of course, water is meant to be semi-transparent, or you can change the thickness of it and things like that. So whenever we put the glowing tube in, you can see down around the sides and near the bottom that it decided not to glow through just as hard. And it's lots of creative choices like that definitely help. So we looked yesterday very briefly at things like colliders and simulating. So if I open a brand new project, just to give you guys an idea of how quick and how fast RealFlow is, we will create a brand new RealFlow. And we'll pick something very simple, like a circle emitter. or we could pick a sphere, for example. So a sphere, of course, will put particles out in every single direction. Now, previous RealFlow workflows would have had you exporting particles and meshes out of RealFlow itself and into Cinema. This is now fully integrated, fully working. Everything can be done here. We can then, even right inside, mesh straight away with real-time feedback. And our mesh, with the millions and millions of calculations that are happening in your viewport in real time, and we're able to get some crazy results and already start working and manipulating the shapes and all of the objects and things that we would want to do. We'll delete our mesh for now, and we'll deal with just particles. That'll allow us to work just a little bit faster. But we're in Cinema, so of course we wanted to interact with other objects like we sort of showed yesterday. We could take a simple box, and even in real time while simulating, we could take this box, and of course we have to tell it, let's interact with RealFlow, so we'll put a RealFlow collider on, and while it's playing back, we can even interact with the particles, and you can see them shooting around and misbehaving really as we change these things around. We could make our box a little bigger and see how it interacts then. And even if we keep the box in the middle of the emitter, you've got so many creative choices and directions that you can go. So that's one way, and you can see how interactive it is. It's not slowing down. Of course, later on we can cache these things once we try to get the render time and get the quality up and get things like that better. So, like I said, we're in Cinema. This is the RealFlow integrated plugin. What other things can we do in Cinema that we typically like to do in Cinema? Well, I'm kind of addicted to this one. If I go back and we set this down to a sensible size, like 50, one thing that we all like to do in Cinema is play with the cloner. So MoGraph cloner, and if I hold down Alt, we already have three cloners. And the emitter's following all of the Cinema rules. It's all inside here. We can do all of the things that we normally would do in Cinema. We can go crazy. We could go 46 emitters. It's crazy. We had a conversation yesterday. The guys from RealFlow were very nervous of me showing this in real time because this kind of workflow just was not possible. But and the Maxon guys as well were telling me, you crazy? What are you trying to do? You're going to break it? You're going to crash in the middle of a live stream? But it really is quite robust. You can definitely dive in and get creative and keep working very fast. So if we go back down to a sensible number of cloners, let's say 7, and of course we can start playing around with things a little more creatively. If I change our cloner to radial, and if we get a little bit closer so you guys can see what's happening, we can switch this over to a flat plane, and we can of course span this kind of thing out. And well, now we have all our emitters planning and things like this, so we could of course start manipulating the cloner and using keyframes and all these values and things like that we're used to in Cinema. So let's pick an axis, and we'll very quickly drop some keyframes. And you guys will immediately sort of get the idea of how creative this can be. We'll rotate these. Now the particles are traveling with them and just going crazy. So again, and I'll drop this just to a sensible number. Let's set it to 3. And if we throw a mesh on this now, and in real time, we'll have a look at what that would do to a water simulation. And of course, that'll pan around with all this millions of calculations, and we can get very quick feedback and an idea of what our simulation is doing. So, we talked about colliders yesterday, and that's a little recap for you guys of how fast and how fluent RealFlow is. It interacts with objects. What I can do now is show you a few working projects where I use this kind of workflow to discover a few things and come up with a few ideas. Excuse me. So, I have some notes. Let's look up September the 2nd. What did I come up with on the September the 2nd? It was an exploding cube. So, I have the project right here. We can open up this project. And we can see exactly the same things that I described. And I have these already cached and ready to go. So, this is the exploding cube. I have it soloed out of the scene, just so we can have a look at it specifically. And of course, in real time, this cube is exploding, and it's very high detail. There is millions and millions of particles there. And we can pan around and get creative and see what it's doing to the mesh and to the particles. We can go back and tweak and recache and things like that. Yesterday we looked quite specifically at caching. We'll maybe get a little bit a look at it later. So this sphere is interacting with the particles, and my creative choice this time was to have the sphere explode out of the center of the particles that were emitted in the form of a cube. We can, of course, turn back on the mesh, and we'll hide our particles. And this was the mesh that was created. Very high detail, but we were able to render and simulate this quite quickly and see some very creative stuff. So this exploding cube, once he's put back into the scene, and we'll put our camera back to where it was. That's our starting camera. So for us, we just simply put this cube in the center of other cubes, and the idea was to create an illusion that this one cube was exploding, and perhaps the other cubes were next, or it's all about a little story or something once a day, or trying to be as creative as possible. So. And there's our Octane preview. So this will start calculating and showing us real time. We've applied beautiful textures with subsurface scattering onto the cube so that it looks that little bit more like jelly or whatever substance that you're trying to aim for. And let me quickly move on to another one. I'll show you guys one more. And we're going for the 24th of August. So it's quite clear we used an object or of some sort to explode something down here. Let's find the project and we'll have a little look. And here we are again. We'll go back to our standard view. So it looks like a crazy mess, but once rendered, this obviously looks very, very pretty. If we start hiding our fluids and we look at just the mesh, it's the same principle. We have decided to interact with this shape with cubes and other objects. If I unhide them, I can show you very quickly. So this is our fluid. And of course, all still in real time. We can scrub back and we can see exactly what I did. I thought, okay, let's be a little bit more violent. Let's stab it twice. And let's make something explode out of the bottom of it. It's just, even that's just beautiful. We could take that and just render that screenshot. That would be great. So we didn't do that, of course. What we did was we put a mesh over the top, and we moved the mesh around a little bit more creatively. And we of course, hid our weapons here and here. And that's what we decided to render. I thought that was creative enough. So, yeah. So let's move along a little. We'll take a little look at Daemons then, and we'll go back to the scene that we originally created with our cloners. We'll get rid of our mesh, and we'll start looking at things like Daemons. One of them in particular, and a very obvious one that would always be needed in simulations, is gravity. And we've seen a little look at this yesterday. Of course, that starts to make things like fountains for us, which is very creative. We can, of course, move these things around. And at any stage, we can change any attributes to do with any of these simulations. For example, gravity is a set physical principle. We could go in and we could change the weight of the gravity. We could increase it, we could decrease it, we could reverse the gravity. Now the water's flowing up, so you could create some amazing things for the TV adverts or CG movies and things like that you're used to doing in RealFlow, except in a workflow inside of Cinema 4D. One thing that we could do, and we can take a look at the next statement, is we can take a little look at the Attractor. Of course, if we pop that into the middle, you'll see slightly the particles have decided to start attracting to this center Daemon that we created. We can, of course, increase the strength of this. So we can increase this, let's say, by ×4. Now it's all kind of going into the center and creating kind of shapes and different geometry that we'd be maybe interested in being artistic and abstract with. So one thing we can do is we can change it from force to velocity, and suddenly we're into more crazy kind of abstract ideas. If we drop our force down to the default rate, you get some amazing results, and all the water starts generating into the middle. So I'm sure you guys can imagine then, once we put a mesh on this, and we give it a little minute to build up some liquid, we could start coming up with very, very abstract, unique things that would look very, very well in the scene. So the next one, and we'll just keep adding Daemons because it starts to look cooler and cooler. We'll add in a Vortex, and then this one's crazy. This one is really, really crazy. And of course, if we turn off our Attractor and our gravity, and if we deal with only one emitter, and we'll make them a little bit bigger so you guys can see what's happening. We'll turn off our mesh briefly. This is our Vortex. It's not too strong. If I go in and start increasing the strength of the Vortex, we can set the strength, the rotational strength up. You start to see crazy things like this happening. So the trick is, how do we be creative with this? How do we start thinking of ways that this can be attractive in a render or be used in a project that you're looking to do? We can come up through the settings of the daemon. We can come up with many, many looks, but it has to be useful, right? So I'll open a project and I'll show you one example that I've used this kind of technique on. And here we go. On the 30th of August, I used the Vortex with a little bit of X particles below, and it looks like the water, or the blood water, is exploding out of the center, which is it's pretty cool. Let's open it up and show you guys what you think. So this is the basic scene. We had our X particles shooting around here, but at the moment we're just interested in the RealFlow side of things. There is our fountain, all playing back in real time. And the millions of calculations are making this vortex all happen above the center of where it's being emitted. And of course, there's a little camera trickery. When we go into our main camera, the emitter source is hidden, so it's a little bit of an optical illusion. So that's one practical use of the daemon. Vortex. So where can we go from here? I'll show you one more basic kind of daemon that is quite useful. And we'll go back to our original comp. And we'll turn off our vortex because it's a little bit crazy. We'll add some noise. This is a very versatile daemon. It can have fall off, and you can see already, if I turn it off and show you the emitter first, that's a standard emitter. The default noise is beautiful on its own. You can hit play, and suddenly you have this strange, abstract kind of morphed particle kind of thing. You can, of course, control the strength and use shaders and fall off and make this quite controllable, and you can animate any of these features. So if, for example, we were to drop the speed of the emitter down to 0, and we fill our sphere with just particles, they sit nice and static. And if I turn our noise off, you'll see they sit quite still, quite static. There's not much going on. If I turn on our mesh, it just looks like a sphere. As soon as I turn on noise and our particles refresh, it starts interacting with the water, and we get these more globular kind of milky kind of noise field sort of generated things. What I can do then is show you how this kind of works in principle in a real project. So let's go find one. And we're going to June 25th. This guy. That's kind of very similar to what you guys seen. It's simply just a noise displacer, and then lots of very pretty depth of field here. I'll show you guys another one. Over to August, and we'll have a little look at the 13th. This is kind of a sort of a plain, kind of beautiful glass kind of render, but the water, of course, had to look that little bit realistic. And I'll open the project and show you guys how I tackled that. Make sure I get my dates right. And this is this scene. Now, of course, if I were to play the simulation, you can see right at the start the water is quite still, quite static. So the trick was to use some gravity and some noise, the two things we've talked about already. And as soon as I hit play, the water falls into the basin, and you can see it never stops animating. That's the noise demon, keeping the water really unrested and keeping it moving and keeping it going. Really, at any point, you could pause the simulation. And if we jump over to Octane, you'll see how beautiful that water simulation looks already. And with the glass, we can start seeing a clearer image after a little while. The water is kind of disturbed and it's upset. It looks a little bit more realistic. Of course, we can go in at any stage and change some of the attributes. We could go in and we could decide that we want this to be more of a, let's go blood again. So we can change it to red, and we get instant update, and it looks like blood. We can go a little darker, of course. That blood's a little thicker than that. Maybe that's too thick, but you get the idea. We have a lot of creative control. Perhaps we could change our simulation that the noise explodes, and we ramp that up, and of course it would pop out of the bowl. So lots of control. I'll show you guys one more. I think this one is one of my favorites, if I remember right. Yeah, decided to use noise and gravity with a little factory simulation. It's like a little isometric thing. So let me open that one and show you guys so you can get an idea of how this was put together. I think this was one of the ones that took me just a little bit longer. Oh, excuse me. And we're opening lots and lots of project files. So this is a little look. We have the whole scene, which was all built on a cube, so that we had a little bit of depth to work with our lava bowl in the center, around here. And it all came from an emitter at the top, which flows down in real time. Well, we can hit play and have a look. And if I come out of this camera, you can see it starts to fill the bowl up. Of course, we have the splashes around the outside, but you can see that the water never stays still. The noise demon is keeping that water going. And it was a creative choice to leave the water looking that little bit more lumpy, because I knew it would glow, and I knew it would look like lava. It would look a little bit thicker, because lava obviously moves a little bit slower than water, of course. So this was our render camera to make it look a little bit more isometric. And then, of course, in Octane, it all lights up like the image you've seen, like the rendered example. So that's a couple of demons already. That's gravity and the noise demon, the noise field demon. Even with those two demons, the possibilities are endless, and you have all the real-time feedback as well to just keep getting creative, keep going, save new versions, keep trying things. If you want to get higher quality, you can, of course, cache and bake those things out for render. So let's take a look at another one. And we have this one. Same kind of principle. It's a vortex and a noise field. And you'll notice these spheres look a little bit more noisy, but the camera's a little further away. They're all water simulations, all 4 balls and the vortex in the middle. Of course, you've got the beautiful ivy and the stone beneath to create the illusion that the stone's exploded and the water's come out of the center. So I think that one took a couple of hours, maybe 2-3 hours, but it's all thanks to the speed of all the plugins and how fast it all integrates and works together. Let's have a look at another one. And we're going forward in time. This one used a lot of demons. This one, well, it used the noise field, but in quite a unique way. So I'll show you guys that one. And I created a starting point for this one. So we have our noise field in the middle. And of course, like I showed you guys, it can work with the Cinema 4D built-in cloner with all of its emitters. There's lots and lots of emitters. We've also used a random effector. so we can increase the scale and the size. If any of you guys have done a little bit of work before in motion graphics, you'll see we've created some random position and scale, so they're all a little bit different in size. What we've done with our noise field this time is change the size of it, so it looks more like a flat disk. And of course, the trick is to animate the disk so that it upsets all of the water simulations as it passes through. And of course, I can zoom in and show you guys a little bit more detail while it's doing it. You can see it starts to disturb them as it moves. And of course, at some point, I decided, stop, that's it, that's enough, I don't want you to do any more. And when it's allowed to play on, the simulation, because it's water, of course, will just keep flowing and keep going. And you can see that it just gets, it becomes quite beautiful at a certain point. You think that, oh, I like that, maybe that'll look good in a render. So I'll show you the finished product. This was the same thing a little further on, higher detail and cached. And we'll go inside our camera, and we put a little bit of a Dutch angle on the camera. And I think that was the point we decided to render at the end. Of course, if I give you guys a little look at Octane, we're going to have a very quick preview of how then depth of field and things like that helped. So you'll notice this foreground sphere is a little bit more out of focus, and these ones at the back, the whole simulation becomes a little bit more clear with some camera tricks then. Cool. You guys learning something? You guys enjoying? Or yeah? Keep going. So we'll move on to another daemon. We've looked at noise, we've looked at gravity, we've looked at a few creative ways you can use keyframes and some of the built-in aspects of Cinema 4D, like the cloner and anything else that you can keyframe and simulate. It really is only scratching the surface. The next one that I'd like to look at is a thing called drag, and I'll go find the example so you guys can have an idea, and I think maybe even from the screenshot, from the render, you guys will know exactly the kind of thing. So that's one. Let's go find the other one. So I think you know exactly what drag's going to do. It makes it look a little bit more like jelly, a little bit more like lava. I'll open the project and give you an idea of how I achieved both of these looks. There's a little bit of trickery. There's a little bit of not real life happening, because obviously water has its own physics. And me being a creative guy, I just completely ignored physics. So we'll switch back to our normal viewport. So, in the vein of staying quite violent, I decided with this one, hang on, I'll show you guys. We decided to hit the water with spears. You can see there, we've moved the final mesh, so let me show you guys the fluid simulation. And we'll hide our mesh, and we'll get a good idea of what we did before we moved it. So these are 3 or 4 spears. We attacked it with spears, which is a bit corny, a bit cheesy, no? But it worked. And the reason that it worked, it was because of this drag daemon. Drag will slow down the particles and keep them together and keep them maintained. I can jump very quickly back into our first example of our play box here. And if I turn off the mesh, we'll get a little bit of playback speed again. And I'll turn off we'll keep our noise field on, why not? And we'll add some drag. It comes on at a very low value, so let's crank the drag strength up. So this is before we add any drag. It goes a little crazy. This is after we add some drag. You'll notice the particles stay really tight together and things like that. So the real way to do this, if I knew any physics or science, would be to go into the fluid and change all of the many settings and deal with things like viscosity and things like that. And I Googled the word and I thought, I don't need to learn this. This is beyond, I don't need to know this. This is crazy. I'll find another way. So the drag daemon is the thing that helped me get my lava look in these circumstances. It meant I could simulate very quickly, just change the little parameters one at a time until the render stayed together and all of the particles stayed together the way creatively that I wanted them to. And this is the way it turned out. So we hit these things very hard with spears. We hit the spearhead at the top, the little triangles, but we left the rod in to allow for a nice glow in the middle, right down the center, and of course you have that beautiful subsurface scattering down the center. It's a little addictive. I use it a lot. So let's quickly jump over to this one, and you'll really see the effect of drag here. So yeah, I made a rock, and that's as advanced as my modeling goes, which is pretty high detail. And we decided to emit some water from the top. I'll zoom in and show you guys. There's an emitter hidden, a circular emitter hidden. It's a little crude, but when you come out and you can't see it anymore, you wouldn't know that it's there. And of course, you can see the effect of drag now. So that's drag working with our gravity, of course, because it has to fall down. And then, of course, we have a noise field in there as well that isn't set too strong to keep it all looking a little bit more upset and a little bit more realistic, really. So, of course, once we get it into Octane again, and I can show you the HDRI and how this kind of responds to light and things like that, because obviously water has a thickness. So let's give it a little play. You can see it all glooping down, and you get a rough idea on the left-hand side of what it would eventually look like. If we pause in any frame, it'll start to clean up. That's just one idea. It looks like this rock is bleeding goo. So that was one day. That was another day down for me. So we've looked at gravity, we've looked at drag, we've looked at noise, we've looked at an attractor. That's just scratching the surface. There are many more daemons inside of RealFlow. There's some that control things along splines. There's some things that can control things with wind and things like that. Really, all of the sort of things that you'd expect to find in Cinema 4D if you're used to simulating at this sort of level. I can show you guys an example where all of these things came together in one. So, a little bit simple, but I decided to put some simulations inside of an ice cube. Kinda, no, maybe not. It's kind of like the fly in the ice cube thing. So, let me open that up and I'll show you guys how that was kind of made. So this is a look without the ice cube, and if we go back to our standard layout, and come out of our camera. Very simple scene, one light and a backdrop. This is our mesh, and we have noise, an attractor, and a vortex. The vortex is, of course, changed over to be very, very light. It's not affecting it too much, and if we hit play in real time, you can see it just keeps circling around the center of the attractor, because the attractor keeps it sucked into the middle. So really, it has no choice but to stay there and get beat up and punched by the other two daemons. So I thought, that's cool, let's put it inside an ice cube. So here's our ice cube. We put a nice frosted glass or ice texture on it. And of course, in real time, it looks a little something like this. There's also a glowing sphere in the center. And if I take off our resolution lock, that's instantly the kind of result you get. I can show you guys what that looks like as well without the cube. Very simple, but whenever you execute it with certain things like inside glass, we could try RealFlow inside of RealFlow. The possibilities are endless. So we use RealFlow with some built-in Cinema 4D things. I thought, will RealFlow work with something that isn't inside of Cinema 4D naturally? So I decided, and I think I like this one as well. It's not often as a creative you like your finished renders. I think it's maybe 1 in 10 you like. And you just hope that tomorrow will be better. And let me go find it for you guys. Here we go. So this one was created with a few plugins. It was RealFlow, but RealFlow was used to drive X particles. And at the same time, we took a step back and we used RealFlow as well. So both X particles and RealFlow are rendered and working together. And I'll open this one up and show you guys exactly how this one's working. think the Maxon guys are still nervous that I'm doing all this real time and live and not using a presentation. So as long as I don't think about it, we'll be okay. So here's our RealFlow simulation. And of course, we're using all the same tricks that I've showed throughout the presentation. There's a few of them. We have the drag, we have the vortex, we have the noise, and an attractor. The attractor's set a little bit lighter, so that, in fact, it's set in negative. The attractor is actually pushing it away, so that's coming out from the center. So at any stage that we like this mesh, we can take our mesh in cinema, and of course, we're all used to doing this, making things editable and baking them down. This is geometry that is made. If I change over to this is typical Cinema 4D geometry, and it's all triangulated polygons. At any stage, we can click our mesh, and we can press C, or we can right-click and click Make Editable. And of course, now, if I solo, that is a simple mesh that you would be used to in cinema. It's no longer a simulation. It's baked down, but it's a single piece of geometry. Of course, then I thought, we could use this. You could use this to drive something else. That's pretty cool. So we'll take a step back, and I'll show you exactly what happened. So we'll hide our RealFlow a little second so we don't get too heavy. And here is X particles, and it's being driven. It's being driven by the geometry of RealFlow. Once it decides to appear, here you go. So all these particles, and if I zoom in, you'll get a little bit of detail. All these particles are zooming out, and of course, I decided to make them look like hair, so it makes no sense. But then, whatever you can try and get the render just as beautiful as this, suddenly those sorts of things don't matter, because if you can kind of trick the mind and think, what is that? You know, it's for abstract art and things like that, or being experimental. Something like this is perfect. If that was the kind of thing I was into that day, or the sort of thing that came out. But yeah, so this was using RealFlow to drive X particles in a very kind of unique way. The thought then afterwards was to unhide RealFlow and have RealFlow in the center. You can kind of see it appear again. And of course, you pick a frame that you kind of like, and there's another frame, for example. And we decided to put a glowing object as well, which was Octane's, or sorry, excuse me, it was RealFlow's mesh with a glowing surface on it. And if I solo that mesh, oh, it's hidden at the moment, let me unhide it. So this was the mesh from RealFlow. So we really used the mesh from different locations of the simulation, one to glow, one to drive X particles, and then the original RealFlow mesh all at once to create this one piece. And if we switch over, I can show you the layers in Octane switching on. Of course, let me come out. And back to our main camera. And there we go. So this was our starting point. Of course, this is some work in Photoshop and things like that to try and pull off. But this is the kind of thing on a daily basis that I try to create and invent. We keep going. All of these renders as well, in case you guys are wondering, are time-lapsed. And you guys can see them on YouTube and things like that. So the process of me sitting experimenting on a daily basis, it flies through all of them, and it can really show. If you follow me on YouTube or any social networks, you can see every day then the struggle or things like that I would go through to try and create ideas or keep innovative. It was really thanks to RealFlow over the past few months where it sparked another burst of creativity. Because of course that plugins and things like that will definitely help you, get a little bit more creative or make you think outside of the box. But yeah, that's RealFlow. I'll finish a little bit early if you guys have any questions. No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. That's been RealFlow. Thank you.